Do.
All right. For our opening, though, we need to announce that the attendance will be strictly limited to no more than 10 people, which is recommended by the Center of Disease Control and Prevention. The general public, however, will have the option to view us remotely through live streaming on Roku, Apple TV, or online at newhanovercountytv.wordpress.net. So at this time, I'd like to call the meeting of the Policy Committee to order. This is May 12th, 2020. I ask Mrs. Adams, Tabitha Adams, to please call the roll.
Mrs. Nichols, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
I'm so sorry. I was having some technical difficulties.
That's okay. We're all working together.
Jeanette Nichols,
Present.
Bill Rivenbark,
Present.
Nelson Beaulieu,
Present.
Lisa Eastep,
Here.
David Wortman, Stephanie Adams, Judy Justice, Ms. Nichols, you can proceed with the meeting.
All right, thank you very much. I move for the approval of the agenda.
Move or approve.
Second. Okay, thank you. Those in favor?
Aye.
You'll need to take a roll call vote.
Okay, thank
if
you. Okay, thank you. So, Deborah, do we vote with everyone that's present or just the policy committee members for the approval of the agenda?
Is the policy committee, I'm trying to think how to word this, are members who are attending, members of the board who are attending but are not members of the committee,
Yes.
permitted to vote under the rules or the policy?
Normally just the committee members, and that would be Mr. Rivenbark and me today.
It's also Mr. Beaulieu. I appointed him as the
I
as
did
the third
not
member.
know that. I'm sorry, I did not know that.
Yep.
All right. So it would
Then-
just be
Then
it
we'll
would
go
just
back
be the members of the committee then.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. So let's start again. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, those in favor, let's say our names and how you vote.
Bill Rivenbark, yes.
Nelson Beaulieu, aye.
Jeanette Nichols, aye. Okay, so the agenda has been approved. Mrs. Adams, do we have the minutes published yet?
I'm sorry, they're already published. I didn't get a chance to put them on this agenda.
Have you seen the minutes, Mr. Beaulieu?
No, I'm not.
So, did you get to see them, Mr. Rivenbark?
No, ma'am.
So may we table this and vote next month, or next meeting rather, on the minutes?
Yes, I would advise that all members, all documents need to be provided for review by the members before they're considered under the new remote meeting rules.
Okay, so thank you. So we'll just table those minutes. The next item is the policy update from the NC Sba.
Hi. So last time we had sent you the remote participation policy, but since then the General Assembly passed a new law that actually changed, well, it established new rules for remote meetings that are being held during state declared emergencies. So we had to completely change the policy. So it's my understanding that the board did not consider that policy at the last board meeting for adoption because we need to use the new revised version instead. So have you all had a chance to look at this, policy 2302?
Someone just did that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't. pick it up.
I think it also, the way we've done it makes it a little more clear. I know you had concerns about the distinction between
You're the only
participating, just individual members participating remotely versus having a wholly remote meeting. And so I think this policy, the way it is now, it's a lot longer, but it does clarify what we're talking about, and it distinguishes between people participating remotely emergency versus having a full remote meeting during an emergency. And it lists all the requirements from the statute too. So does anyone have any specific questions about it?
I don't.
Could I get someone to send that to me? Tabitha, maybe I didn't receive a copy of the new one before the meeting this morning. So I haven't had a chance to look at it, and I'll be glad to do that.
Yeah, the
Yes,
version
I'll be
they
happy to
have,
do that.
we had just sent them, we actually sent this to them like, we released it on Friday. I think we sent it to them so that they could have it for the meeting early. So all they have is, they have a draft. I think there's like 2 typos that I have to fix that I noticed, but yeah, I just sent them the footnoted copy. So if you want to, because you'll probably want to review the footnotes too, in case you want to change anything. But the footnotes are not part of the policy. When you adopt it, we'll send you another version that has no, that's just so that you have more background information as to why it's written the way it is.
So McKenna, I did read it several times and I can't remember. Do we have in there the concern that the legislation mentioned about getting a permission from participants for the hearings?
So we do have in there, yeah, so this policy says that generally you're not, let me see where it says it.
I think it's down at the end.
Yeah, at the end, well, at the end, it has a provision for allowing the quasi-judicial hearings, so allowing hearings with consent.
Okay,
So
I thought I read it
quasi-judicial
somewhere.
hearings, yeah, may be held with consent of the parties and in conformance with the requirements of GS 166A-19.24F in this section.
Okay,
That's
Good.
only in the event of emergencies.
yes. It's long, but it involves a lot, and it's a major policy that I hope we don't always have to use. And the definitions are very clear. That's good. Mr. Ravenbark, you have anything to add?
No, ma'am. They did a very good job on that.
A lot of work. Okay. Mr. Bowyer?
No, I appreciate the work. It's an improvement over what we had last time. So really gets into detail, which I appreciate. Thank
So
you.
I think that unless we have any other comments or changes with the typos that were mentioned, we'll have it ready for the June 1st reading for the board meeting. Is that correct? So is there a motion to move this on forward?
Miss Nichols, I'll review this and let you and the other policy committee members know if I see anything. I just, again, it's a long policy and I can't read it and give you any legal input right now.
Okay.
But
So if you will, yes.
I'll be glad to let you know once I've had a chance to read through it.
Okay, great. But and any changes we'll have ready for the first reading at the June meeting. Is that correct? Okay. Is there a motion to move this policy forward for June?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Those in favor of forwarding the policy for the June meeting for first reading? Mr. Boyer,
Aye.
Mr. Ravenbart,
Aye.
and Mrs. Nichols? Aye. Okay. We are now moving on to the next.
Before we go on, could I just mention that the parts,
Janine?
I'm sorry, yes, this is Janine Murphy at the School Board Association, is that this, the legally required parts enacted by the General Assembly are already in effect. So even though your board won't have voted on this until June 2nd, and depending on Ms. Stogner's review, just know that the legal requirements would need to be used if you had remote meetings under certain circumstances between now and the next board meeting.
Ms. Nichols, given that, if absent any concern from Ms. Stagner, would it be wise to go ahead and waive first reading with the situation we find ourselves in?
That's a good suggestion. I certainly think when we present it to the board, we can ask to waive first reading.
I think that would be a good idea.
Yes. We'll certainly be honoring this policy for quite a while, utilizing it. Okay.
Hopefully not
We
too
don't
long.
need to vote on that, do we, Deborah?
No, you can certainly recommend that to the board. Again, as Janine said, the legal requirements for remote meetings are in effect, and that's what we've been doing with the roll call votes, et cetera, already. But certainly if you would like to recommend that this is important enough to be put in place without a second reading, then that would be appropriate to do at the board meeting.
Okay. And we'll definitely have Tabitha Adams to get it out before the board so that they can read it and understand it and ask questions ahead of time. Okay. And they can certainly refer to you, Deborah, if you have any questions. Is that correct?
Certainly, anytime.
All
And Ms.
right.
Nichols, let me just to clarify the process going forward too. Let's sort of off the topic of this policy, but let's suppose the board does adopt this policy. Then now that New Hanover is using our web hosting, all Tabitha would need to do after the board votes to adopt whatever version they adopt, Tabitha just needs to send us the policy as it was adopted with the adoption date, and we will make sure that it is posted to your board policy website within the next 24 to 48 hours. So the process is probably a little more streamlined for Tabitha.
Okay. Thank you. So our next policy is the policy 2500. What does OPTB stand for?
So, okay, so that's option B. So actually, this policy, we were really just sending this to you just to show you how in our policies, because of the new remote law, you have to get consent from all parties if you're going to hold a hearing remotely. We also changed our policy, the hearings before the board, to clarify that we will use, well, we may want to use hearing panels if we're legally allowed to, because in this type of situation, if you don't get consent and you can't hold the hearing remotely, but you do need to hold it, you're likely going to want to hold it as a panel because you can't have too many people in one place. But because you don't have our policies yet, I don't think it's really necessary for you to adopt this. We also have an option A so this policy, option B, is very short. It doesn't provide a whole lot of detail. Option A is multiple pages long. It provides much more detail about board hearing processes. And for your purposes, the policy, I mean, you also already have, I mean, you have the legal authority under the statute to use hearing panels. So you are able to do that. And I was looking through your policies, and it looks like in a bunch of your policies, like your student assignment or your grievance procedure for employees, you do already state that that you may want to use hearing panels. So I don't know that this is actually something you need to do right now, but when we send the 2000s, you could adopt that then, or if you want to, you could adopt it now, but I don't know that that's necessary.
This was part of a package that we sent out to all our subscribers. Mostly we wanted to alert them to the fact, as McKenna said, that they may want to explicitly provide that the board may designate a panel of 2 or more board members to hear and act on behalf, unless otherwise required by law. So we sent this to you, in the case of this particular policy, we're not sure you need it, but we wanted to give you everything that we sent out as our update so that you would be well informed, in the know of some of the issues that sort of domino issues, things that are also impacted by the new legislation. And the hearings was simply because we want to make sure that because of this consent requirement, you could hold a hearing where you were allowed to by law. Now, if you were doing a student expulsion, you couldn't do a hearing panel because the law doesn't allow that. But so if hearing panels are allowed, we were trying to make it explicit to boards that, or in board policy, that the board was in fact going to do that. So this is more by example than necessarily what you have to do right now. Obviously, you're at the beginning of a long policy review type of process. So we're giving you all of this information now so that you can have and bear this in mind as you work your way through other policy sections.
Okay. So we'll have this handy so that we can refer to it, but we will not put it on the agenda for the next board meeting. Is that correct?
That's your decision. We're providing it to you so that you will feel like you have been fully informed, and not having carefully reviewed all of your policies, we want to make sure you know what's there. And if you have any concerns, you could go forward with this, but we don't think you need to, I guess is what I'm saying. We're kind of working at the beginning of a process, and we are not as familiar with your policy manual as we will be, a month from now.
Okay. So I'm assuming that if we have a need for a hearing, we can certainly talk with Deborah and find out exactly if we're in line with the law and policy.
Right, yeah, because if it was someone who refused to give, this would only come up if it was, you needed to have a hearing, one of the participants refused to give consent, and we were still under lockdown, then what we're saying is, you would probably want the option to have a hearing panel rather than to have to convene the whole board. So that we're trying to making it easy for boards to do that should they face that situation. Now that situation may not come up, I don't know how much longer the state of emergency is going to last. And so, that it's kind of a, if certain things happen, then you would be prepared.
Janine, may I ask a question?
Sure.
So are you saying, like, if we are going to have, say, a non-renewal, you're not quite sure if in our policy it exists? I know that we do have hearing panels possible for some cases, but you're saying for specific cases, you're not sure.
I don't know how to address the non-renewal specifically. Do you want to talk about that, McKenna, or?
I don't, yeah, I would have to look up your non-renewal policy. I'm not sure what it says.
Generally, the ones we think about that can't use a panel are student assignment appeals that a panel can make a recommendation to the board, but the board has to make the decision. Also in student expulsion, the board has to make the decision. There can't be a panel. So there's a few places where you have to have the full board, but unless a full board is required, you can work through the panel.
So we're going to have student assignments coming up, and then potentially other things right at the end of the year. Would this cover us for those types of hearings if we don't happen to spell them out in our current policy? I guess what I'm saying is there any downfall to adopting something like this, even if it's redundant?
I don't think so. Yeah, it could be redundant. I mean, this basically says unless otherwise required by law. So it's giving you the option to do hearing panels unless it's required by law. You're bound by the law regardless of what your policy says.
Right.
So, yeah, I realize the student assignment appeal kind of situation is something you will be facing likely, June, July. So McKenna, did you read their student assignment policy yet?
Yeah, it provides for appeal or for panels.
Okay, so you're there with that. You've already got that with your student assignment appeal situation.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That the board, I mean, in that situation, there's a panel, and then the panel makes a recommendation.
Recommendation, correct.
Yeah, so it's not, but you wouldn't have to have a full hearing, the hearing in front of the full board.
Mm-hmm.
But if this is going to be, I'm sorry, if this is going to be policy at some point anyway, there's no real downside, is there, to providing that redundancy?
Right, there's just a lot, there's a more detailed version. Like we said at the beginning, there's option A and option B. Option A has a lot more specific details. You could adopt this shorter version now, and then once you have had a little more time to review things, you could consider going for option A. That there's, but this would be the sort of easy first step, as opposed to having to go through our whole policy that spells out all the different steps in due process and so forth. So yes, you could go ahead and adopt this and then reconsider later whether you want the more detailed version or you want to stay with this real short one. On the advice of Ms. Stagner, of course.
So Ms. Stagner, what's your advice?
So I agree with what Janine has said, that you certainly have the authority under the law as it stands. I do, and I did note as I was going through working with the human resources folks that there was no specific hearing policy. And so it is not entirely clear just within, as Ms. Estep said, the non-renewal, what procedure is used. So I don't think it hurts to adopt a very short hearing policy, as Janine said, if you want to add more detail to it when you get to that portion of the policy review, that would be fine.
So is there a motion then to place this on the agenda for the June 2nd meeting?
You talking about adopting the option B?
Yeah, to place it on the agenda for consideration from the board.
Yeah, so moved.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that. That's fine.
All right, those in favor, Mr. Boyer,
Mr. Boyer, aye.
Mr. Ravenbach,
Aye.
and Mrs. Nichols, aye. So it will be on the agenda for June the 2nd for first reading.
And Ms. Nichols, we'll get the option A to look at that we could vote on that also if we wanted to.
I don't think we'll get it at the same, before the 2nd of June, will we, Janine? Or
Oh, we
that-
can certainly send it to you now. It does include why we revised our option B was because our option B didn't explicitly mention the hearing panel. Our option A already did mention the hearing panel, so we didn't need to revise it, but we would certainly be able to send a copy of it for comparison purposes for your review. And then your committee could decide, how you would like to proceed after you reviewed option A too. I mean,
Well, if I might make one recommendation. So from the discussion, it sounded like this policy would be adopted or be recommended as sort of a placeholder so that there is a hearing policy. When you get to the 25 or to the 2000 section and reviewing that section, you'll have the other option and could consider whether to replace 2500 at that point. If you're going to compare both of them for adoption, I might recommend that it not go forward to June and that you just hold off and compare both of them so you can make that decision instead of looking at option A before the June board meeting, and then it just doesn't seem to make sense
option A is pretty
logistically.
long. Yeah.
We're actually planning on starting with the section 2000 anyway, so you will get it soon. Like that'll be the first section that you'll get of policies, so it won't be too long.
So do we accept A and hold off on B?
Well,
Or
we haven't
accept
seen
B
it.
and hold off on A?
Well, I think we need something in place before July.
Yeah, let's go with B. And
Uh-huh.
then, if we decide later after we've read A, we might want to change it.
And we
For
can
right
do
now,
that.
we'll be covered.
I agree.
Okay.
So we have voted to put it on the agenda for June 2nd.
Right.
This would be option B at this time. And we'll
Yes,
look
ma'am.
forward to option A
In the near future.
in the near future. Thank you. Okay. So moving on to policy 7100, recruitment and selection of personnel.
So I didn't have anything to add to this. I think as far as this policy goes, the big issue was we only had even looked at this initially was to decide whether or not what you wanted to do with your fraternization and nepotism policies. But if you're okay with the policy, the fraternization policy you currently already have in place, I would suggest just waiting until we get to section 7000 to handle this, because this policy touches on so many other topics and that could impact other policies in your manual. So unless there's a particular reason that you want, is there something you want to change, or there's something that you don't have in your current policies that you would like to change, I would recommend just waiting on this one.
Have you read our policy?
On what topic? On recruitment, selection of personnel, like on recruitment and those-
Fraternization? Yeah.
No.
I just want to make sure we're covered until we get to the 7000s.
No, I haven't looked at your 7000s, or the equivalents of your 7000s. So
You've looked at
So
the
Jeanette-
fraternization though, right?
right, and that one's, I mean, that's in place, and that's something you already have in place. And
Okay, that's all. That's what I just want to make sure we were
Right.
covered.
yes.
Okay. So we want to hold off on that, Jeanette?
I think so. So, yeah, because we already have most of this in place.
Okay.
And we'll just wait for them to, when we get to that series. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Right,
So-
yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Do we need to vote on this decision, Deborah?
Well, I don't think you do, but you certainly can. It's, you're tabling it. Did we vote to table? You did not vote to table approval of the minutes. I think you can just vote, or you can just move on and vote when you're going to move something forward to the rest of the board.
Okay. I think we're all in agreement that we'll hold off on this one until a later date. Is that correct?
Right.
No objections. Okay. So our next item on the agenda is naming of facilities. And that is on there because it was one of those policies that we had in transition with all of our meetings. Is that correct? We never finalized the wording.
So obviously, this one is not coded with our numbering system. If your board decided to adopt this as its naming facilities policy, we could renumber it to be the facility naming policy that we have, take the place of the facility naming policy that we have. This is one policy where the board has a lot of discretion. So, you could post this in your new manual with a new number if you wanted to do that.
Janine, has the committee seen the School Board Association naming policy for comparison?
I'm not sure, but it is super general.
Janine, you did send it to me a while back.
Yeah,
I sent it to the
did.
board.
And it doesn't address some of the, it does not address the concern of what I will call unnaming facilities, which I understand was one of the board's concerns. I had looked for some samples around the state and was not able to find any that addressed how a school board would rescind that. I mean, I think the board has the authority to rescind the name of facility anytime they want to. So I have not looked at this policy recently to think about how it could be better or anything like that.
Ms.
It
Wagner?
doesn't say-
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, there's something about someone's got to be gone from the school system for a certain amount of time before they can have something named after them.
That's
It's
a
at the very
standard
top.
that you could adopt. Your board could specify that. Yeah.
Well, we've talked about that because we've had a situation come up where we had somebody that's still in the system.
So that's covered, but we do need some guidance on unnaming. Because it becomes political.
So you mean some sort of process so that it doesn't look like it was just an arbitrary, we had a board meeting, and voted 3 to 4 to do it. Yeah. So you have input or something like that.
Yeah, the only thing that we can point to right now is that right towards the bottom third, it says the board reserves the right to change facility names at any time by following the process set forth in this policy, but it doesn't really speak to any process.
No.
Other than walking through the process above for naming, which is kind of what we reverted to. But I think it would be much more helpful if we had a set process spelled out.
So again, I didn't see this ahead of time. I'm just pulling it up. It looks like it was revised last in November of 2019. And so are there revisions that are being proposed for today?
Yes, the reason it was revised in November was to put in that year wait clause.
Okay,
We did have a group come forward at one of our high schools that wanted to name I think it was a baseball facility after a current coach. And so we put in that year waiting clause that you had to be separated from service. And we have had in general a rule not to name any school after a specific person, but more, geographical something, that's what we have been sticking with. And Jeanette could speak more to that. In the past, there have not been as many rules in place in terms of naming facilities, stadiums, gyms.
right.
Schools have been a little more lax. And so this issue came up with wanting to basically change the name or unname a stadium at a high school. And there was an online petition to change that name. And when you look at the policy, it doesn't really speak to a set process. So what we said was we would have to follow the same process as is set forth for the naming.
Right,
And
to change the name.
correct. And that didn't sit well with the public, but it also didn't feel right that we didn't really have another set process to speak to.
So is the desire then to amend this policy to include some way to change or unname a facility then, but no specific language is proposed at this point?
And I do think we need to have it in the policy before we present it to the board.
The other thing that I was just noting in reading this is that it says the superintendent or designee shall formulate administrative procedures and forms. Do you know if those administrative procedures are in existence?
We have not seen any.
I have not seen any.
No.
So I haven't had a chance to give this a lot of thought, but my initial inclination would be that some of that can be clarified in the policy, but some of it can also be in more detail in the administrative procedures, and that may really be where the nitty-gritty work will occur. And so I certainly understand the desire to make sure the process is clear, but a lot of times the process is part of the procedure or regulation instead of the policy. But I think it could be clarified that the board can rescind or revoke the name of a facility under certain circumstances, and that will trigger the process that's set out in the administrative procedure. That would be my recommendation.
One of the problems is that one of the people that's leading this group that wants to change a name, he's contacted the Board of Education, the State Board of Education. He's contacted everybody, and coming back to us, telling us that they said that it wasn't a problem, just go ahead and do it, and this and that. And we know that that's not right, but we just need to have all our ducks in a row, because it appears that we're just saying we don't want to change it. We just want to do the right thing and do it the right way.
I believe that gentleman's argument was we can waive our policy and rename something, which legally I think we could waive a policy. But
you certainly can.
I would like to have something. I'm sorry.
Well, you certainly can waive your policy, but then you fall back into the same trap of being accused of being arbitrary.
Exactly right. And so that's what I would like to see put in here, something where it's more clear cut. I don't know if we need to spell out something about, criminal charges. If somebody stands credibly accused or convicted of some sort of crime, that a facility would automatically, a name would automatically be revoked or changed.
Would you like me to try to propose some revisions to this policy to address that consider at the next meeting?
Yes.
Please.
we probably won't ever use this policy but once. I mean, it just, I'm sure y'all have not
Never
run
know,
into this
Bill.
much.
Well, you don't know because we've got several, I mean, not to be a naysayer, but we have several gyms, facilities, stadiums that have been named after people.
Mhm.
And that is the danger that exists when you do something like that. So I think to me, it's not just about this stadium and this incident, but it's about, what happens 10 years from now.
Yeah.
We have to think about the future, and we're setting the precedent now for what might exist, 5-10 years from now. So I think, I would love for Ms. Stagner to weigh in on that.
I agree.
I'll be glad to get some options to the committee members or and Ms. Sba.
That would
Thank
be,
you.
yeah, it's very necessary.
Mhm.
Okay, so in this case, then we will just hold off on this particular policy as well until we get a more detailed and one that's going to work for both sides. Yeah, which is going to be a challenge for you, Deborah.
All right. Well, I think if you have some just clear rules in advance, it makes it harder for people to argue. They may not be happy, but at least they know that they've been treated fairly because those are the rules that have been adopted. And I do think having some procedures, administrative procedures in place, and I can sketch out something and share it with Dr. Burns.
And he may have some input also on how we can handle this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I think one of the problems also was that facilities were being named and the board didn't even know
Absolutely.
happened. So
Yep.
there was a sort of education of the wider school system that the authority for naming resides with the board, not necessarily at the school level. If correct me if I'm wrong, but that was my understanding.
That is correct. Janine, can you tell me, do you happen to know if there are and Dr. Burns, you may know this as well, are there school systems around the state that do not allow any facilities to be named after individuals?
Yes.
I believe Wake County's policy, I haven't looked at it in a while, limits the naming of schools to other than persons, people, geographic locations, other opportunities for naming, but not people.
Okay, so that's schools, but what about like individual facilities like stadiums, building, like separate buildings, gyms? Because the schools will take it down to the, I'm going to name the floor after Michael Jordan, so.
Again, I haven't reviewed the policy in a while. I do believe there is a provision for naming of other than the school after persons, after people.
Okay, so it's similar to us.
What about naming rights if companies want to come in and pay to have their logo or whatever on a facility? We haven't addressed that.
Well, that could certainly be addressed. I know that's becoming more common. It's not widespread yet, but it's certainly as school districts look for additional resources, it's something that has come up that I can certainly look at that and bring you back some information as well.
Okay. If we're going to change this, we need to add everything we possibly can because someone, as Lisa pointed out, they can get to something we never thought of.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
if you're
name a brick, sponsor a brick on a floor.
Well, we've done that.
Yes.
if you're talking about companies coming in and their logos on something, do you mean like they put up a scoreboard and they sponsored it so their name's on it as opposed to you're actually naming something after them? Because that actually will be addressed in policies about advertising in the schools.
Okay. No, what I was thinking, if some company wanted to come in and give you X million dollars to name a new facility and they gave us a great deal of money, would we accept that or how is that? for the future again. There's a
Coca-Cola
lot.
Stadium, yeah.
They want to buy the right and have it.
So, Deborah, if you will, please take everything into consideration and help us with this so that we can move forward with it and be fair and legal. Okay. Any comments, the comments from the committee?
No, ma'am. Except if somebody wants to give us $1 million, we probably would name that building after them.
That'd be tempting, wouldn't it?
Ms. Nichols, I'd like to recap the action from today, if that's okay.
Please.
We'll have policies 2302 and 2500 at the next board meeting, regular board meeting on June 2nd. And the board will consider waiving first reading for 2302. There's no action on policy 7100. And for policy 5400, naming of facilities, Ms. Stagner and I will discuss some revisions and bring that back to the next policy committee meeting.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Now, Dr. Burns, it is my understanding that on the 15th that we are going, or Janine, you might address this, or McKenna, we will be receiving the 1000 series drafts.
Well, after talking with Dr. Burns, the 1000s, I just need to clarify that when we send a section of policies, it would be our section 1000, not the current New Hanover section. So your current 1000s are mostly having to do with board matters. And those are comparable to our 2000s. So what we were looking to do is actually send you a portion of the 2000s. I think I think we were proposing to do maybe 13 or so. We're trying to be cognizant of the fact that your school system has so many other issues going on right now in terms of the coronavirus and superintendent search and so forth, that we didn't want to bring 30 policies for the board to consider at a regular board meeting when they also had other very important matters to consider. So I think we were sort of looking to send them a portion, but not a full section of policies on the next go round.
Okay.
So what we would propose to do is send a portion of the 2000s in time for your next policy committee meeting, which my understanding is the second. When in June is the next policy committee?
I don't know that we've established a date. I know we have a board meeting on
Ms.
the
Nichols,
2nd. Yes.
we have been trying to do our policy meetings consistently on the second Tuesday for the last few months. So that would be June 9th and starting at 9 a.m.
Okay, so if we tried to get you a portion of the board policies, and these would not be any specific to a current crisis in New Hanover, it'd be more just regular board operational issues. The board is a corporate body and, voting and things like that. Is that what you would like to get started with then? I think we've addressed the ones that were brought to us as needing immediate consideration. Looking at my screen or looking at my computer. So that's why we were going to go start with some of the just basic 2000s for the policy committee to look at. And I don't anticipate they'll be very controversial or anything like that. It'll just be a good way to get moving through reviewing and revising policies and bringing them forward to the board
Okay.
for consideration. So if your policy meeting is going to be on June 9th, then I think that we would have the policies to Tabitha 5 days before. So we would have the policies to Tabitha by the 4th. Does that sound right, Tabitha? I don't know if she's logged in, but I think that's right. We would get them to her on Thursday.
That would be great if we could get them early so that we
Right.
can have them online.
Right, okay. So we will shoot for that June 4th date.
And are you okay with having just a section of it as opposed to the whole section?
Oh, I think that's a much easier way to do it because we want to make sure that we are quite familiar with each policy before we move forward with it.
Okay.
That way
Okay.
we're not have to go back.
Right, yeah, so this is, I think, McKenna, when we counted, it was like 12, 13, something like that. The 2000s through the 2100s. Two zeros and the 2100s.
And I'm sorry, Janine, is there any way we could get you're talking about 13 policies. Is there any way we could get those a week before?
Yeah, before your committee meeting?
Yeah, I mean, just to give us some
Yeah.
time to really do a deep dive, go through it, and make sure we don't have any questions.
Yes.
That
So
would be great.
then we would be trying to get it to you by June 2nd then.
That would be great.
Okay.
McKenna and Janine, can I ask a question about the posting? And I just want to clarify and make sure I understand. If the board adopts a new policy that it's never had before, then it would just be adopted by the board and then posted on the new web hosting site. If the board adopts a policy that replaces one that it already has, is there a requirement to vote to rescind the old policy, or is it automatically taken down?
We prefer that there be a vote to rescind. If the old policy is completely one-to-one, sometimes you get a policy where they'll adopt a new policy. There's an existing old policy that still addresses something else the new policy doesn't replace. In that case, we wouldn't take it down because parts of the old policy are still relevant. So it's a little bit of a tricky thing. Sometimes we try to strike out what in the old version, what is no longer viable, but it would be better and cleaner to say, if it's like the facility naming policy once, I don't know what the board has now, but when they adopt something, we would like to see it coded with facility naming with our code number. It would wholly replace whatever New Hanover has now. So for clarity's sake, I think it would be good to say the board rescinds policy 5040 and enacts and adopts policy, whatever our facility naming is. So it's pretty clear. And then we would take it down out of the old manual.
So if an old policy is still up that addresses some portions of a topic, but there's a new policy that addresses the other portions that are still remaining in that old policy, is there some sort of statement posted on the hosting site that instructs people looking at the policies that in the event of a conflict, the newly adopted policy will control? I'm just concerned about.
Yes, Deborah, it does. The landing page, when they first click on the policy manual, there's a landing page that says that the board is in the process of this transition. And if you're looking for a policy, you should first look to the new manual, and that the new policy does take the place of any old existing manual. So, the landing page when they get to the landing page, you're going to have to click either on the old manual or the new manual. We recommend they go to the new manual. And then if they don't find what they're looking for, then that's when they go look in the old manual.
I just want to make sure it's clear anyone looking at it would understand if there's a conflict between an old policy and a new policy, the new one is the controlling.
Control, yes. I will go back and review the landing page to make sure, but I think that it's pretty clear.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Deborah. That's important because if it's a controversial policy, definitely there would be some criticism and concern.
Well, and that's the reason why we want to get the old one out of the way completely whenever possible, so that it's not there for someone to pull it up and say, but your policy says this, and then you have this argument, but that's not our policy anymore. This is our new policy. So yeah, if we can take the old ones down as quickly as possible, that's the best case scenario.
And they will be archived, Tabitha?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. And we are hoping to have all of our old policies to the School Boards Association by June 1st.
Oh, excellent.
So that means that the quote old manual will all be online and searchable to the general public.
Yes. Okay. Well, Dr. Burns, I appreciate your summarizing. So we're all ready for the June 2nd meeting. And then we're going to meet again on June 9th at 9 o'clock with new policies to think about. Okay. Anything else from the board committee?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Board chair? Okay. So,
Sorry, I had to unmute. Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
okay, thank you. This time, then we will adjourn this meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor of the adjournment, please say your name and I.
Mr. Bullier, aye.
Mr. Robinmark, aye.
And Jeanette Nichols, aye. Okay. So we are now adjourned.